Good morning, everyone. Your morning weather briefing for this May 25th finds that there are a couple of notable changes this morning in the forecast. I think that my forecast is a little bit wetter in far southeastern portions of the Corn Belt for around Wednesday, Thursday of next week, as that area is influenced by some remnants of a tropical system. That tropical system does look to be slower on its arrival, now arriving for late Sunday night or into Monday, but now it does look to be a more organized system than was suggested by maps of recent days. Temperature rainfall forecasts this morning show big amounts of heat for the next 10 days, but are still indicating some moderation in temperatures for the 11 to 15 day time frame. For the 6 to 10 day period, you can see that I have gone a little bit wetter in the far southeastern Corn Belt for that period. Otherwise, a rainfall forecast for the next 2 weeks in the Corn Belt that favors the best rains in northwestern and far southeastern areas, with an area of below normal rainfall in between. QPF discussion for the 1 to 5 day time frame. I think that this forecast is going too wet for the central and northern plains. Certainly going to be some rainfall in that area, especially late in this 5 day time frame, but I think that their coverage of 1 to 2 inch rainfall amounts in that area is far exceeding what is actually going to be happening for that area. Otherwise, it is tropical influences bringing all of the big rains to southeastern portions of the nation, and you can see very limited rainfall amounts in between those two areas in question. For the day 6 to 7 day time frame, I think that overall I would have a wetter forecast in this period for southeastern portions of the Corn Belt. Again, I think that remnant of the tropical system is going to be bringing rainfall into that area at that time. High temperatures yesterday. Temperatures continue to climb over the nation's midsection, with a greater area of 90+ degree readings being seen for a lot of the northwestern Corn Belt and the northern plains. Those represent temperatures 10 to 20 degrees above normal, and we did set some record highs and know that the 91 degree high temperature yesterday at Grand Forks, North Dakota was a record high for the date. 18-hour rainfall totals yesterday pretty scattered in nature. We'll admit that some very good rains in the Minneapolis area was fairly beneficial in that area after they saw the blizzards of last month. They really have not seen a whole lot of rainfall since that time, so I think that you have to consider that as quite beneficial, and you can see that on the radar estimated rainfall exactly how much rain fell in that area. Also some scattered rains across portions of Kansas and Missouri, and that is an area that is still seeing some rainfall on the radar this morning. I think you'd have to consider all of that rainfall as largely quite beneficial in that area as well. A look at what the radar may be showing as far as 7 p.m. Later on today indicates that, again, favoring the western Corn Belt for what would be some widely scattered rains for later on this afternoon through this evening. If you would happen to be a spot that gets under one of the better totals, you could see a nice rainfall amount. But again, you can see the widely scattered nature of the rains that would be seen at that time, and most likely this would be dying off fairly quickly shortly after this period in question. Looking at surface features as we go to 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday. Again, a tropical system at that time, certainly arriving slower than what the maps had suggested from earlier this week. We had been looking at a landfall for about early in the morning on Saturday, but now we see that as we get towards early in the morning on Monday, that the European model is still indicating the system to be offshore at that time. You can see that the system overall has better organization. I think that that's something that is kind of a common feature in the weather models this morning. It's still not going to be anything worse than a tropical storm, but I think that the odds are very, very high that we will indeed see a named system developing in the Gulf of Mexico sometime during the holiday weekend, and probably make its way to landfall either late Sunday night or early in the day on Monday, with that landfall point being somewhere between southeastern Louisiana and western sections of the Florida Panhandle. The remnants of that system should be working its way northward, and you can see the remnants of that system by the time we get to 7 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. And again, I think that it would be the remnants of that system that would be enhancing rainfall chances, at least versus my forecast from yesterday, across southeastern portions of Indiana and into a good portion of Ohio, and that again would be for the Wednesday, Thursday time frame of next week. Otherwise, with regards to the rainfall forecast, we still have a situation where a couple of upper-level low-pressure systems are going to be bringing what rainfall is seen in the middle of the country for the next week or even a little bit longer than that. You can see the varying placements and varying strength of the upper level low pressure systems in question from the various models as I draw them right there. Again, like we've talked about the last 2 to 3 days, some small differences on the exact locations of the lows, some differences on the strength of the lows. That's something you're going to be seeing very typical of the models, as they just cannot handle these features real well much more than 2 or 3 days in advance. But again, the general placement of the lows from the models in question still suggests that there's going to be two areas favored for rainfall. That is going to be the northern plains and the northwestern corn belt, and also the far southeastern corn belt, especially eastern portions of the mid-south, and then some heavy rains in the southeast. In between, the models are still indicating plenty of ridging in the central portion of the corn belt, indicating that between those two areas of better rains, we are going to be seeing a significant portion of the central corn belt southward into the southern plains, where rainfall is going to be quite limited. So like yesterday, there's my rainfall outlook over the next week. It is very similar to what I posted yesterday. Some nice rainfall amounts going to be eventually seen in the northern plains. Most of that rainfall starting on Monday, with varying rainfall chances after that into at least the middle of next week, eventually bringing a lot of the northern plains some nice rains. For the southeastern corn belt, again, southeastern Indiana and into Ohio is an area that I am now favoring for some decent rains for especially Wednesday, Thursday, as the remnants of our tropical system works into that area. Otherwise, the rest of the rain shown in the mid-south and the southeast is from our tropical system, and of course some heavy amounts of rainfall during that time frame in the southeast. But again, in between those two areas, lots of ridging aloft, going to be limiting rainfall chances across especially the central corn belt and into the southeastern into the southern plains, at least over the next week. And it wouldn't really be surprising at all to see that type of rainfall pattern really continuing into the second week of the 2-week forecast period as well. You can see from the maps that I presented earlier that especially in the 11 to 15 day time frame, that it would be the northern plains and also southeastern portions of the nation that I am favoring for rainfall, and that even in the 11 to 15 day period, the central corn belt would be a favorite area for below normal rainfall amounts. As far as the temperature forecast is concerned, still all sorts of above and widespread much above normal temperatures across a big portion of the nation's midsection into the opening few days of June. Looking at high temperature forecast for Sunday and Monday, again, as we showed in recent days, an extensive area of 90+ degree high temperatures at that time in the northern plains, in the central and western corn belt, and into the southern portion of the plain states. For both Sunday and Monday, these would be high temperatures that, especially in the northern plains and into the western corn belt, would be indicative of record high temperatures falling for those time frames. Now, as we get towards the middle and latter portion of next week, heat is still going to be present. It is going to be diminishing more and just be impacting, as far as the corn belt is concerned, more towards southern and southwestern areas. But you can see that where the heat is found at that time, that it would grow even more intense. Looking at a high temperature forecast for about Friday, you can see that most of your 90-degree heat is in the southern and southwestern portion of the corn belt, but note the extensive area of 95+ degree heat at that time, even some 100 to 105+ degree heat at that time in the southern plains. So maybe diminishing the aerial coverage of 90+ degree heat in the corn belt for the middle and latter portion of next week, but where that 90+ degree heat is seen, it will be more intense in nature, probably some 95+ degree heat in the southwestern corn belt, even a lot of the southern plains seeing 100 to 105+ degree heat. The bulk of this heat in question probably reaching its maximum intensity on either side of the June 1st time frame. Longer term, though, we are still looking at some moderation in temperatures for the 11 to 15 day period, looking at 500 millibars as of 7 o'clock in the morning on June 7th. You can see that a trough of low pressure is forming at that time in the eastern portion of the nation. Good model agreement on the formation of that trough, and that the ridge of high pressure at that time would be working its way more into western portions of the nation. It's not an overly cool forecast by any stretch of the imagination, though. Note that in the 11 to 15 day period, I am still calling for above normal temperatures in the southern plains and into the southwestern corn belt, with cooler temperatures, more normal readings to the north and to the east of there. Internationally this morning, normal to below normal rainfall in Brazilian corn areas for the next 2 weeks. Obviously, the dry season has set in with a vengeance in northern growing areas. Some decent rains further south, though most of that rainfall in those southern areas of parent and Mato Grosso do Sul probably at least still a week away. Over in Europe, looking at normal to above normal rainfall in Europe over the next 2 weeks, while at the same time a distinctly drier than normal weather pattern for all of the winter grain and summer row crop areas of the former Soviet Union. A lot of that area seeing nothing in the way of rainfall for at least the next 10 days. Meanwhile, in the spring grain areas of the former Soviet Union, still a fairly wet pattern there for the next 10 days, and a decidedly cold weather pattern there on most days for the next 10 days as well. A snapshot of temperature anomalies again for May 30th sees an extensive area of easily below normal temperatures in the spring grain areas of the former Soviet Union at that time. I am still fully expecting that there will be multiple mornings next week in the spring grain areas where low temperatures get to the freezing mark or even slightly below the freezing mark in a lot of the area in question. If you're looking at that type of warmth in Europe and the western former Soviet Union at that time, and some warmth to the east of there while cool weather is in between, obviously you're looking at an amazing weather pattern, and that is indeed the case. Showed this a couple days ago, but I thought I'd once again show it this morning. Notice the incredibly deep trough of low pressure in central portions of Russia for May 29th, showing massive amounts of cold Siberian air flooding southward into that area, while on both sides of that deep trough, big ridges of high pressure over in Europe and into Mongolia and Manchuria as well, keeping temperatures in both of those areas warmer than normal. As you can see, we have a ridge of high pressure at that time in Mongolia and in Manchuria, so it's probably no surprise to see that 15 to 8% of normal rainfall for Manchuria and for a lot of the area in question running below normal. For Manchuria, the bulk of the rainfall that is shown in the 15-day forecast is going to be occurring for the next several days. Portions of Manchuria seeing some decent half to inch and a half rainfall amounts before they go back into a strictly below normal rainfall pattern again for Manchuria for the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day time frames. In Canada, not a lot of rainfall there for today through Monday, so most of the rain that is shown in this 10-day rainfall map from the European model is going to be occurring for around the Tuesday time frame and throughout the 6 to 10 day period. Does look like eventually some nice rainfall amounts across a big portion of the Canadian prairies, especially eastern portion of Saskatchewan and into Manitoba. Note that not all of the area sees good rain though, with a good portion of Alberta and into western Saskatchewan still seeing fairly limited rainfall, even as the rainfall chances increase for the Canadian prairies starting around Tuesday of next week. Finally, for this morning in Australia, notice that as far as 24-hour rainfall is concerned, as expected, some nice rains, locally over an inch, occurring in a decent portion of the winter wheat areas of Western Australia. They are looking at normal rainfall coming up. Not any big rains in the forecast. The bulk of their big rains occurred during the last 24 hours, but various rainfall chances over the next 2 weeks, giving western wheat areas of Australia close to normal rainfall. Eastern growing areas near to below normal rainfall during the next 2 weeks. Some modest rain is going to be starting to fall again in eastern wheat areas of Australia starting around Monday or Tuesday of next week. That's what I have for this morning. Everyone have themselves a great day, and of course have yourselves a great Memorial Holiday weekend period.